All right, guys, so I think this is a pretty good place to jump back in because I've started to look back at Van Gogh's painting. Now, one of the things that I'm really looking for are the lines that I'm seeing through this painting. Now, some painters really emphasize lines, some painters really de-emphasize lines. I can talk about that a little bit more at length another time. And Van Gogh's paintings, the lines are fairly prominent and they're also colored. So a lot of times the way that painters shape lines is to put the line in and then to shape the paint over that line to thin it out. So I'm just kind of going through and I'm making some of my lines a little more violet or maybe even a little bit more brown. And the next thing I'm going to do also is start to get rid of all of this pink in my background. And again, I don't think that Van Gogh would have necessarily started with this particular color. This is just what I had lying around, and I thought that it would be good to use because it is almost like the color complement of all these blues and greens because it's an orangish, pinkish, beige color. And I'm just starting to actually think about, you know, some of the kind of currents of texture in the painting, even though I'm going to keep building that as I go. But I'm making sure to always be intentional about the way that I'm placing my strokes. You know, this is how we play our instrument. So it's good to keep track of that melody. Okay. I will be so happy when all this pink is gone. So I'm just gonna try to pick up the pace a little bit. And if I'm going over some of the contours that are defining where my head's at, that is fine because I'm going to have to go back into my painting and reestablish those anyway. I don't worry if there's not a lot of precision at this stage. It's kind of like a camera coming slowly into focus. But I do really want to get rid of all of this pink. And I am almost there, except for this ear. Ears and feet. Very difficult. Okay. So I've got just like a little ghost of my underpainting showing through. And if you go to a museum, hopefully one day they will open again, if you look really closely at a painting, you can a lot of times see just little tiny slivers of the underpainting showing through. Now I'm going to go back, I'm going to go back to a picture of me, which is scary enough, in this version, so it's definitely getting a little more scary in my painting, but we're gonna make it work. And I'm just gonna start to slightly reshape things. And I'm using, once again, a round brush. And just to remind you, I'm using ultramarine blue, yellow oxide, and quinacridone magenta. I'm using some Titan buff, which is unmixed here, and some titanium white. Typically what I'll do is I'll lay my paints out kind of like on the outside, and then I'll mix inside and keep, you know, my mixtures kind of separate. Not super systematic about it. Okay. Now, you might notice that I'm just kind of letting each stroke do its job. I'm not going to worry too much if some of these marks I'm making are a little bit too thick, because like I said, I'm going to go back and reshape things. Now I mentioned that I usually work larger than this painting. This is only 9 by 12 inches. So this is going to be a little bit challenging to get the kind of surface texture that I want, especially with an inexpensive brush. But I'm fairly confident that I can do it. We will just do our best. Now I'm starting to add some warmer tones into my painting. And that's important to do at this stage because I noticed in Van Gogh's painting that he does have some warmer tones kind of embedded in his layers. Some browns, burgundies, some colors that are almost like in the violet family. And even though I want the focus to be on the face, I also don't want to forget about the neck. Now, in my drawing classes, I talk a lot about mark making in terms of hatching, cross hatching, and contour hatching. Contour hatching is one of my favorite types of marks to make. So with contour hatching, we're sending our hatching like around a form. So that's something that Van Gogh does a lot. And sometimes when I'm painting, I'll work in kind of broader, smoother areas. I'm going to be doing some portraits in some very different styles. But for this is definitely what we're looking for. Now, to get my marks to be the correct width, what I really need to do is be very mindful of my pressure, as well as the viscosity of my paint. So if my paint is too dry, I'm going to get a lot of brush drag and I'm not going to get those like more fluid marks. Van Gogh's painting is an oil painting, and I'm working in acrylic, so that's a little bit challenging in some ways, although acrylic paint has many of the same properties. You just really have to adjust your speed. One of the reasons why I think it's good to learn how to paint in acrylic is because it forces you to learn to paint more rapidly, but the learning curve can be a little more challenging. You might be wondering why it's good to paint rapidly. There are some marks that can only be made quickly, and typically when you learn how to paint quickly, what you'll notice is that your painting will have a lot more energy and kind of forcefulness. Okay. So I just have a few more minutes, but I'm just going to pick this back up in a second here. And I'm just shaping my paint strokes very gently, very directionally. And you might notice that I'm really using my strokes to define planes. And I'm mixing some of my colors on my painting, but I'm doing just a tiny bit of pre-mixing on my palette. And I'll show you that in a few minutes. Oops. So Van Gogh's painting has a very green tone, and although it can be a little difficult to work with just because it's so powerful, I'm about to actually introduce some Phthalo Blue into my painting at the next stage. Phthalo Blue is one of my favorite colors, even though it is, as I said, very potent, and so it has a real tendency to take over. But I'm at the stage where I'm starting to need it. Okay. So I'm gonna stop there, and I'm gonna get out some Phthalo Blue, and we will resume this momentarily.